Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here with us today. If you're the kind of person who loves discovering how human societies adapt, how they evolve, and really just thrive across generations, then you are for sure in for a treat today. We are going on a totally fascinating ethnographic journey. We're going to be taking a deep dive into a really remarkable community, the Kabui, also known as the Rongmei of Manipur. And we'll be leaning on some incredibly detailed data and observations that were pulled directly from the 1961 Census of India. It's essentially a perfectly preserved snapshot in time, but it tells a completely timeless story about human resilience. And really, that brings us right to the core question driving our explainer today. How exactly does a mountain tribe adapt to valley life without losing its soul? Just imagine it for a second. Your ancestors have lived for generations up in the high, heavily forested mountains. And then you migrate down into a bustling urban valley. How do you keep your identity intact while trying to navigate a completely unfamiliar, fast-paced environment? Well, let's find out exactly how the Kabui, or Rongmei people, managed to pull this off in the urban centers of Imphal. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, who are the Rongmei? Second, demographics. Third, kinship and community. Fourth, daily life. Fifth, the cycle of life. And finally, number 6, reforming the future. All right, part 1. Who are the Rongmei? Let's take a look at their roots and migration. So you'll very often hear the Kabui refer to themselves as the Rongmei, and actually it's a wonderfully literal description of their history. The word itself is a combination of Rong, which means south, and Mei, which means people. Put it together and you get the Southerners. You see, their original ancestral home was up in the mountainous ranges of the Tamenlong area. But a little over a century ago, groups of these mountain dwellers started migrating down into the southern portions of their habitat. Specifically, they began settling right into the Imphal Valley. And in the process of adapting to this brand new geography, they embraced this new name, Rongmei, as a way to literally honor that massive journey. Moving right along to Section 2, Demographics, a Society in Numbers. To put things into perspective, back in 1961, the total population of the Kabui, the Rongmei, in Manipur stood at exactly 29,218. This number is absolutely crucial because it really sets the scale for the distinct, tightly knit community we're examining today. But wow, look at the disparity here. It's huge. The vast majority of the population, over 26,000 people, were still living in rural areas. The urban dwellers that we're focusing on for this explainer, they made up just a tiny fraction of the whole, only 2,335 individuals. That is literally about 1/12 of the entire Kabui Rongmei population at the time. It really highlights their incredibly unique position. They weren't just settlers, they were pioneers of adaptation, just this little micro-community trying to hold fiercely onto their roots while being completely surrounded by the urban sprawl of Imphal. And if we zoom in on the economics, it adds even more color to that 1961 picture. Out of all those urban dwellers we just talked about, only 504 were officially classified as being part of the working force. We're looking at 351 male workers compared to just 153 female workers. And, the source data also points out a pretty striking fact. At this exact moment in time, not a single Kabui Rongmei girl had yet graduated from university. It's definitely a stark marker of the era, but, as you'll see in a bit, it was an era perched right on the edge of some massive, game-changing social and educational shifts for the whole community. All right, let's head into Section 3, Kinship, Clans, and Community. Unity in Diversity. And this brilliantly illustrates something super cool about how cultures interact, cultural syncretism. Basically, the Kabui Rongmei are a patrilineal society, and they are divided into 4 main exogamous clans. You have the Gengmei, the Golmei, the Kamei, and the Longmei. But because they were living in such close proximity to the Meitei, who were the dominant community in Manipur, they actually began to align their clans with the Meitei Selais, or their social groups. So the Gengmei aligned with the Angam, the Golmei aligned with the Kumal, and so on. It is just a brilliant example of how 2 entirely distinct cultures, living side by side, start to weave their social fabrics together. They created this mutual, shared understanding, all while making sure they kept their distinct identities totally intact. Which brings us to Section 4, Daily Life and Dwellings, the Physical World. Take a look at this architectural transition. It's honestly like night and day. On the one hand, you have the traditional house, earthen floors, bamboo skeletons, and roofs thatched with local e-grass. Classic, beautiful, perfectly adapted to the environment. But then, on the other hand, you see the modernization that was taking over in areas like Kinship.
We're talking corrugated iron roofs and solid brick foundations. But here is the absolute kicker noted in the census data. Regardless of whether the house is an old traditional build or a brand new modern structure, there are almost never any fences. None. The space right in front of the homes just remains totally open to the street. It creates this incredibly welcoming, unified neighborhood vibe where community interaction isn't blocked off by massive compound walls.
You get this really striking visual duality in their daily fashion, too. By the 1960s, the menfolk had largely pivoted to Western clothing. Pants, shirts, coats, and honestly, bicycles were everywhere. However, the women completely maintained a traditional dress. They proudly wore the fisorn, which is this wide sheet of cloth woven on a traditional loin loom, and it was worn either around the waist or up over the breasts. But, despite these changing outward appearances, some of the best traditions remained completely universal across the board, like the community's shared, absolute love for ZU, their traditional and frankly indispensable rice beer.
On to Section 5, the cycle of life. Let's look at faith and festivals.
Man, this just brings the whole thing to life, doesn't it? During major festivals like the Gangai, all those everyday Western clothes we just talked about, they completely vanish. Instead, the community brings out these incredibly intricate, traditional hand-woven costumes in bold blacks, reds, whites, and yellows. The whole community gathers, they dance, and they just fully immerse themselves in the ancient rhythms of their ancestors. It is a powerful, powerful way of reinforcing their bonds right there in the heart of the urban valley. Let's actually zoom in on a specific life cycle event to see how this works in practice. The Nanu ceremony. This is an ear-piercing festival held every single March to bless all the children born that year, and it's highly structured. First thing early in the morning, the older women fetch water using traditional gourds that they call tumbas. They literally go house to house, washing the faces of all the infants. Then the whole community gathers to share food and indigenous salt cakes. The headman steps up and prays for the children's welfare, and then an elder actually pierces the baby's ears. But here's the best part. While this is happening, the older boys and girls literally shout at the top of their lungs just to drown out the baby's cries. It is a loud, beautiful, and admittedly slightly chaotic collective initiation into the tribe.
Now, what's really interesting about the Rongmei ritual is how these ancient beliefs completely anchor the marriage ceremony. In fact, no Kabui Rongmei marriage is even considered complete without this specific divination. It goes like this. A priest, known as a mu, chants an ancient marriage hymn. Then, a plantain leaf is laid down, and an iron hoe and some ginger are placed right on it. A cock is sacrificed, and the priest meticulously examines the position of the bird's legs. From that, he actually divines the future of the couple. He predicts whether the marriage will be a lasting one and whether they're going to be blessed with children. So it's this incredibly intimate, solemn moment right in the middle of all the joyous marriage celebrations.
So what anchors all of this? Well, these rituals are all rooted in their ancient religion, which the educated elders often refer to as Kabuism. It's a very structured pantheon. At the very top, there is Ragong, the supreme creator deity. Right below him are the Bumbus, who are the deities responsible for protecting the village boundaries. And finally, you have the household deities, known as the Kairo. But, and this is fascinating, here again we see that incredible cultural blending happening. Many Kabui Rongmei households in Imphal actually adopted Sanamahai, the traditional household deity of the neighboring Métis Hindus, as their own. They even go so far as to dedicate a rear corner of their homes to this deity exactly the way the Métis do. Finally, we reach Section 6, Reforming the Future through the Kabui Samisi. By the 1930s and 40s, the community elders started to realize something pretty important. Some of their strict ancient customs were actually holding them back in this new, fast-paced, modern urban setting. So, through an organization called the Kabui Samiti, they got together and initiated some massive, sweeping reforms. For example, the munkat, or bride price. This used to be an incredibly complex and hugely expensive exchange involving buffaloes and iron hoes. The Samiti simplified it. They set a highly practical, fixed limit of exactly 125 rupees. And the nime, or taboos. Well, in the past, if a death occurred during childbirth, a family would have to destroy their house and quarantine for months. The Samiti radically shortened that quarantine to just 5 days. They basically completely re-engineered aspects of their culture so that their people could actually survive and thrive in the modern world. And that spirit of reform? It totally trickled down to the youth. The ancient system where young men and women had to sleep in mandatory nighttime dormitories, it was totally abandoned because, frankly, it conflicted with modern school schedules. So, instead of the dormitories, they formed youth clubs and women's societies. These new groups fostered sports, literature, and modern skills. The youth were so engaged that they even published a journal, and they gave it the brilliant title, New Horizon. It was entirely dedicated to bridging their rich, ancient past with their rapidly unfolding future.
So the crucial point is captured beautifully right here in the source text. The adaptation of the Kabui Rongmei was a journey from the shore of tradition, but not by discarding it, the urge of the rising generation to link the vision of their little community to the wisdom of the universal man. I just love that. They didn't erase who they were. They translated who they were into a language that the modern world could understand.
So that leaves us with a pretty big question to ponder. As we watch the Kabui Rongmei navigate their identity with such grace, we really have to look inward. Think about it. How does your own community balance its ancient traditions with the relentless, everyday demands of the modern world? Do you preserve things exactly as they were? Do you adapt them? Or do you actively reform them? Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey through the 1961 census data. I really hope this explainer sparked your curiosity today, and I absolutely can't wait to explore another fascinating topic with you next time.